Welcome to the Dev Days conference. We are in Hall 1, Languages and Framework, and we have Steve, our next presenter, in front of us. And I'm very happy because for the first time in this hall today, after 5 speakers, there's somebody talking about .NET apps. And I'm a .NET developer. I've been listening to React, I've been listening to Java, and my face just lit up. It's late in the evening, but then there is .NET apps to save us. So, Steve, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you so much. All right, yeah, so hello everyone. So yes, we're going to be talking .NET today. So my name is Steve. I'm an engineer on the Uno platform team and one of its main maintainers and contributors. And today I want to talk to you about how you can get your .NET apps up and running on any platform, right? So we're bringing .NET to the world, to every platform, no matter where you are developing on or where you're using these apps. So what I want to do is basically we're going to jump into some code, we're going to jump into some demos, we're going to show a lot of stuff today. I'm going to try and get it all under the time. But the first thing I want to do is do a quick overview of what Uno platform is, how it works, and then we'll jump back into those code and start building some apps, building some cool stuff. So, oops, next slide. So what is Uno platform, right? So Uno platform itself at its core is a free and open source framework for building cross-platform applications, right? So using .NET as its underlying framework, right? And so basically you can build apps using Uno platform and target anywhere that .NET runs. So if .NET runs there, it runs Uno apps, and .NET runs pretty much everywhere now these days. All from a single code base and all from a single project file as well. That we'll take a look at the structure of what an Uno app looks like, right? And so the core platform is basically a implementation of a single API layer for the UI that works across all platforms, and it plugs into the native rendering engines of each of those platforms, right? So whether that's UIKit for iOS or the Android Views system or engine, or HTML, or even Skia-based rendering for multiple different platforms, right? So whether you're using the native rendering engines or you can have Skia basically do the Flutter style of rendering for different platforms depending on which platforms that you're running on. So that's the core technology that is the basis of Uno platform, right? And on top of that, there's this ecosystem of first-party libraries that we've built for things like theming and styling your applications, for additional complex controls that don't come out of the box with the main APIs, reusable modules for things like navigation frameworks or presentation frameworks or dependency injection, so all that stuff. So basically, it's a whole platform for building applications. At its core, it's that cross-platform UI API, but it's a whole ecosystem to basically anything you need for a full-on application, we have availability for you to use that, right? So there's also great tooling for integration with developers as well as designers, right? So we have things that we'll look into today. We have integrations with Figma, the design tool. We also have great integrations and extensions and all that with Visual Studio Code if you don't want to do Visual Studio, or if you want to use a different IDE, which we'll jump into all that shortly. But next, let's take a look at what a Uno app actually looks like. And so this is this is a slide that I've used over the years. And it's very basic, but I like it. And it's been, we're running out of room as we've added the platforms basically, but it's just a quick look of what I mean when I say you can write once and build everywhere, right? So it's just a simple piece of code that you can see, and you can see how it looks across all these different platforms. You'll notice that it actually looks the same across all these different platforms, right? It's sort of styled in that same way, but it's actually rendered natively on each one of these platforms. Whereas, in certain cases like Linux here, it's being rendered using Skia as a 2D based rendering graphics. And so you notice if you take a look at the XAML that we're actually looking at right now in the center. Do I have my laser pointer? So right here, so the XAML that we're actually using to define our UI here. So this is the XAML code that we have. It may look familiar to some of you especially if you're coming from the Windows world of development, right? So this is straight up WinUI XAML. So that is being built and running across all these other platforms. So the thing is, we are actually, what we're doing is we're taking these WinUI APIs, these well-documented and already established APIs for defining UI that are used originally for building Windows apps. And we're using those APIs and making them work across totally new platforms. So bringing them to the web, bringing them to Android, bringing them to iOS, bringing them to Linux, so it's the same code, it's the same behavior, it's the same everything. And when I mean it's the same code, I actually mean it's the same code, right? So like we actually have been able to port over most and many of the original controls written for Windows and have them running across all these new platforms. So when you're using that date picker natively in the browser or in your mobile app, that's the real date picker written by Microsoft. It's the actual code. It's the actual behavior and everything that's running on your Windows machine right now, but it's actually now running across all these other platforms. And so it's been great, like partnership with Microsoft, having access to this. Now, of course, WinUI is open source, so go definitely check out all the C++ code that's there. But we love C# here, so we've been porting it over. And we have and so things like the date picker, we have, it's just been massive reuse of code, bringing over all these XAML lines of code, all these C++ lines of code. Plus, on top of that, we get to increase our testing coverage because we have all the tests that were developed by Microsoft for these controls already. We have these now running across all of our platforms, running these tests and having them covered across Android, across iOS, across all these things, right? So there's lots of coverage there and lots of cool stuff that we've been building and bringing over. And so along with that, we have controls, like I mentioned, defined by WinUI. So the date pickers, the text boxes, the buttons, all the stuff that you would normally use for building an application. But we also have great library of controls coming from things like the first-party libraries, like I was mentioning. So one of those is the Uno toolkit, right, which provides out-of-the-box cross-platform controls that aren't originally in the WinUI APIs. So things like tab bars or navigation bars or chips and cards and like other things like that. And there's also the things like the Windows Community Toolkit, right? So the Windows Community Toolkit, as well as third-party vendors like charts from places like Live Charts or maps from things like Maps UI. And so the great thing about this is these vendors and these controls like the Windows Community Toolkit and Live Charts and Fusion and all these people, they've had controls and stuff that's been targeting the UWP or the WinUI APIs. And since they're already targeting those APIs for those controls, we're implementing that same exact API without any changes, right? So if you're already targeting the WinUI APIs, then you're targeting Uno as well, and you just didn't know it already. Just didn't know it yet, right? So we have a large set of controls and everything that's adaptable to bring to all these different platforms, as long as they're targeting those APIs. And so let's jump into some code and let's take a look at what a real app looks like and what some of these components actually look like while they're running, right? And so the first thing that we're going to do is our initial experience for getting an Uno app built. And that's going to be using our wizard. So let's go ahead and let's open Visual Studio and let's create a new app. So I have Visual Studio open. Just double check that my slides worked. Yeah. So we can create a new application. And right now I'll do Visual Studio. We'll jump to some different IDEs in a second. But basically, we can start a Uno application here from the app templates that we have built into Visual Studio. So if I open up an Uno app and I click Create, it might open on a different window. But we will have our wizard. Let's see. We will have our wizard. Oh, there it is. Show up. And so this is basically how you can get your Uno app up and running and bootstrapped with everything that you need, right? So you'll see, I won't go through all the options because there's a lot, but you'll see we have options we have already previews and support for the previews of Net 9, but I'm going to stick with Net 8. We have presets here. Can I zoom in? Yes, I can. So we have presets here. So we have a recommended and sort of a blank preset. So I'm going to go back to blank because we're going to do some customizations. But recommended comes with all the bells and whistles turned on, like everything that we're going to slowly build up to in this talk. And so for platforms, we have all the platforms are going to be selected. So for Android, for iOS, for mobile, for web, we could target the WebAssembly target for the browser. And for desktop is very interesting. We have obviously Windows, so Uno sort of steps aside and lets WinApp SDK and WinUI 3 do its thing. Whereas on desktop, we can target macOS using Mac Catalyst, along with iOS. But we also have the ability to have Skia-based rendering for your desktop targets, right? So that means for Linux, for macOS, and this time macOS targeting sort of the AppKit APIs, and Windows using sort of WPF as a shell to host the app. We're actually going to be rendering using Skia rather than the native rendering engines, and it looks the same. It looks the exact same. So really cool stuff. So we'll take a look about that. Some of the stuff that you can get out of the box, we're going to talk about some presentation frameworks later, but we're not going to have one right now. But if you wanted to get started with using MVVM as your presentation framework coming from the Microsoft Community Toolkit, you have that option here. And we also have our own implementation of a presentation framework called MVUX, which we'll get into in a bit, in a little bit. But this is coming from Uno as part of our Uno extensions package of modular functionality that you can use as our pre-built cross-platform first presentation framework, right? A really great thing is the markup, right? So I'm going to stick with XAML here, but you have the ability to build your UI using C# as your markup language instead of XAML if you so wish, right? So you have the option to do both. I'm sticking with XAML because it's my first love, so I'm staying with XAML. What you saw before in the slider there was you saw that it was sort of like, it looked like a Windows style slider in that application. So basically by default, you'll have those Fluent design themes, the Fluent design styles coming from Microsoft, from Windows. That'll be what your app looks like across all these platforms by default. We also have material design, so you can style your cross-platform apps using the material design style. So I'm going to choose material because we're going to be building a little bit of a material application. What I mentioned before with MVUX is as part of these extensions, these Uno extensions that we have, so that you can have modular bits of functionality. So if you want to have dependency injection in your app, if you want to enable logging, if you want to have a certain navigation framework installed or logged in, plugged in by default. We'll go into navigation and MVUX in a bit more because those are the big kahunas of the Uno extensions. So we don't have to go too much into details other than that. I had mentioned the Uno Toolkit. So the Uno Toolkit is a set of additional controls and helper classes that you can use when you're building apps. So we're going to use that as well. And the only other one I'll talk about here is Maui embedding. So that's a really great one. When I was mentioning all those UI components, if they're targeting WinUI, they're targeting Windows, right? But the thing is, if you have components that, or vendors or controls or whatever that are targeting .NET Maui, and you're most interested in platforms like Android, iOS, Windows, basically where we intersect with the platforms that Maui targets, you can actually take those controls and host them within Uno applications seamlessly, and they'll work just as they would work in a Maui application, as long as they're running on the same targets, right? We have some targets that don't align technically with what Maui targets, so they won't work on those platforms, but the ones where they intersect with Maui, those ones work perfectly. And so a bunch of others. I won't go through the rest, but you can bootstrap with authentication. You set up some app stuff, set up testing, set up whether you want to have CI pipeline stuff ready in your app to go. But we'll go ahead and create this app. And let it build. And so we should have our first Uno app. So this is what an Uno application looks like. Come on, Visual Studio. There you go. So I'll close this and we'll switch over to the target I want to run on. And we'll take a look at sort of the structure of an Uno application. Hey, go there. Okay. So this is an Uno app. So if you look here, there's not much to it, right? There's just a single CS proj that we have here. That's basically it. So if we open up that, And this is new as of our current release. So basically, if you were used to Uno before, there might have been multiple projects there, a base project, one for Android, one for mobile, one for WebAssembly. That's all been consolidated into a single project, single source of all your code. So you don't have to worry about all that, all those extra platforms anymore, or all those extra projects anymore. And so this is what an Uno app looks like. So we have our project, and we have basically all of our shared code is in this project here. So we have assets here. So all your shared assets, everything that you're going to have within your application, it's all going to be within one shared spot, and it'll properly be brought in. So if you have image files, they'll properly be made into icon or to image bundle assets for iOS, or they'll be put into the XX HDPI and HDPI and MDPI folders for Android. Those will all be done for you and properly placed at build time. So you just place this in one spot and you're good to go. And the great thing is you still have access to things like your platform specific stuff, right? So if you needed to do platform specific code, you can head over here into the platforms folder. Under Android, you have, the entry points for your application natively for the main activity. Same idea here. Your delegate is here for iOS. So all your platform specific access is still there, and you can have platform specific code if you so wish. And so that's all available for you, right? So the big thing I want to show is the actual CS project itself. So if we look here, there's not too much that's actually in the project file. So the big thing I want to point out here are the target frameworks, right? So we have some of the ones you may be used to. So Android, iOS, Mac Catalyst, Windows. And so we have these nice ones here for desktop and for browser WASM. So now we have a split, right? So we can actually do runtime checks and compile time checks and all that for, am I currently running in the browser, or am I currently running on as a desktop application, and do some different logic in your app if you so wish for platform conditionals. And so net desktop is an interesting one, right? So we're going to run the desktop head in a second, and I'll explain a little bit of what that is. But the other thing I wanted to point out was the Uno features. So this is specific to the SDK sort of that comes with the project. It's a list, so you don't have to worry about your NuGet package dependencies. You don't have to worry about any of that. Basically, what we're looking at here is just a different way of managing all your dependencies in your application. So here we have, okay, I know I want to use Material in my app, and I know I want to use Toolkit. That's all I got to do. All the dependencies are pulled down for me, pulled into the proper packages, and all done properly for all my cross-platform apps. So if you wanted to look a little bit at, it opened in the other window, at some of the features that are available to you in our documentation, you'll see them here. So you can have Material, you can have Toolkit, you can have, if you want to start logging with Serilog, if you want to use MVUX, like I was mentioning before, that's here as a feature. And so these all get pulled in for you. And you don't have to worry about the NuGet dependencies anymore, right? And so if you were to look, you could just go to your build props folder, and you'll notice here you have a central location for handling which versions that you actually want to be pulled in for those features that you have activated in your application, right? So let's go ahead and run this. So the thing is, I'm going to be running this as the desktop head, right? So what desktop means basically is I have the option to choose different sort of target frameworks for the desktop that I'm targeting. But here, what we're actually doing is we're going to be launching, it opened in the other window. Let me just pull it down, and I'll resize this. Here we go, here we go, here we go. And so what we're actually looking at here is a native Windows application. So this is within a WPF shell, right? So it's being hosted within WPF app. And then we're rendering the app using Skia as our rendering engine for actually drawing our UI based on our XAML, right? So if we looked at our XAML, you'll notice that we have our text block that says hello Uno platform, and we have that here. And you'll notice you could see sort of the Chrome around the window is the normal Windows Chrome that you're expecting to see, right? So we can do nice things. Hello dev days, and we can change our UI, and you'll see it hot reload on the side here. So we're actually running this app. I don't have the debugger attached to anything. We just have nice hot reload support within Uno platform, so we can change things like that. So you'll see that the UI changed on the right here. Let me just close this window. Okay. And so we can do some nice stuff. So, we can add buttons, click me. And we should have a button show up. And it's you'll notice so now we actually are seeing the material part of the material design that I posted here. So we have a nice button. I don't know if you could see it on the screen, but you see the nice ripple on the button as it's going, so we can add things like that. So it's all good. Now, let's build sort of a more interesting application. So we do have a lot of reference applications and reference designs and everything that you can use if you want to get up and running and started, right? So let's go to our designs for one of our sample apps. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is talk about, yes. So in terms of getting started, getting sample apps, getting some reference applications for how am I going to do this? How do I properly build a UI? We do have a bunch of samples and tutorials within our documentation. So if you go to the Uno docs, you'll see this samples and tutorial section. We have the basic counter. We have some workshop applications it's a workshop that's hosted on the docs website that will guide you step by step into building an application, whether that's a simple calculator app or a YouTube player app, and it has navigation in it. It has presentation framework usage. It has all that nice stuff in it, right? And so one of the great things are Uno samples. So we have a repository of those workshops and of those tutorials, but we also have just other reference applications like the commerce app, right? So if we go here, you can go to the Uno platform, Uno samples repository, and we have this commerce application that is just going to be a small eShop sort of app, right, that you can build. So we can go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. And so what that looks like is here. We have a Figma design of this, right? So if you don't know what Figma is basically a design tool for app designers or for designers basically. It could basically drag and drop components, build your pages, build your website, build whatever your UI of how it all look. You build wireframes, do all that nice stuff. It's very, very powerful. And so here are some wireframes and mockups of the Uno Commerce app that I was mentioning, right? So it has a login page, it has the main product details, it has a search page, and it has product detail pages and all that fun stuff, right? So it's just a sample app, and we have a working version of this application with the code written in our Uno samples repository that you saw that you can play around with and see how it was done. But one of the great things that we have built is a plugin for the Figma tool, right? So if I were to take this, and so this is just dumb design data, right? Like, so I could take this, I could drag it around on this canvas, like I'm just moving components around as a design canvas. So I could actually take this this page, and I could right click and I could open the Uno plugin. And so since this is a web-based tool, right, you can run web-based little apps within the Figma sort of sandbox ecosystem. And so since Uno targets the web itself, this is actually a small Uno application running inside of Figma, since we're targeting WebAssembly. And so it's built with Uno, with material design, as you can see. And so I'll move this to the side a little bit. And so here's our login page. If I were to refresh what I had selected as my selected frame, you'll see that it now gets rendered here in the plugin. And when I talk about rendered, I'm saying this is a running version of that design data. So this is a working app. I can't zoom in too much, but you'll see here, this is a working text box. These are working password boxes. This is a working button. You'll see that ripple again, like I had clicked on the other button before. So this is an actual native like WebAssembly Uno application running. And what happened is the plugin parsed that design data. So parsed those components that are in this canvas here, and generated the UI code and actually ran it like live within it. So it's a real Uno app. So if I were to actually move around this stuff in the design and refresh, it'll rebuild the UI and it'll refresh and give it a second. And now the button's on the bottom and it's a working button, right? So really interesting stuff. And so one of the great things is you now have the XAML that was generated based on the design. And so you can also export it as C# if you want, if you're using C# as your markup language. So you have, all the C# here, but we're using XAML. So I'm going to go and I'm going to copy this code. And we'll jump back to our Visual Studio. And we will replace our current code with the code that I generated from the Uno Figma plugin, right? And you'll see now our desktop application, our Skia. So that was a WebAssembly using HTML and all that stuff to render. Now that same exact XAML, I pasted here, and the Skia-based rendering desktop application that we're using is working just the same. We have the nice material text boxes. We have the login page or login button that does nothing, but it's working. And so if I were to do some cool stuff after that, we can even hot reload stuff like the code behind the file, not just the UI, right? So let's go ahead. Let's paste some interesting stuff, like a button click, and we'll save that, and it'll reload. And we'll just add the click handler that should now be detected as button click. And code changes were applied successfully. So if I are now to click, it opened on a different window. But if I now were to click on that login button, it will open a second window. If I click again, it'll open a third window. So we do have now multi-window support in Uno applications as well for the desktop targets, which we're currently working on the mobile targets, but we do now have multi-window support. So some really cool stuff that you can build. And this was all done hot reload style. I didn't have to rebuild the application. It's just going as I save. So really interesting stuff. So that was basically the beginnings of the Commerce app. That's just the login page, right? So if you wanted, you can go to that GitHub that I had mentioned, the Uno samples, within the reference folder, there's the Commerce GitHub. The Commerce folder. And right there is the full-on application where the UI has been generated from Figma, and then we had built in the presentation logic and all the other stuff that go along with it to actually getting it working as a working commerce application. So definitely go check that out. That is a good reference application for how to build applications and how to see how certain code is used. It's using stuff from the Uno toolkit. It's using Uno extensions for presentation framework and navigation. So it's a really good reference application. So next, I have to switch over, sorry. So next, I will keep this up for a second as I was supposed to put that up as I was talking. But if you wanted to, you can go check out the link that I have here. This link will go to that reference design for the Commerce app. And that also includes all the components, all the Figma-based components that you can drag and drop and build an application with. So it's all the compatible material styled components that you can use to build Uno apps can be found at this link in this Figma file. It's a free community file that you can use. The plugin itself you're able to download it and use it within Figma. You have a good amount of exports that you can export the code with and play around with it. But then there's a license that you can look into if you're curious about using it for more heavy usage. So another great thing that we could take a look at, and I won't go through all of them, but here you see Commerce, actually, the Commerce app in our screenshots. There's also some great examples of Uno apps that are built for demo purposes and prototyping, like the official Uno gallery and the playground. And there's also the toolkitlabs.dev, which is a great initiative that's being taken on for the Windows Community Toolkit team for sort of prototyping and handling new controls that they're sort of working through. And these are all built with Uno and running in the browser, right, natively. So if we wanted to look at the Uno gallery, say, you can go to gallery.platform.uno, and this is an Uno application built, it's built with Uno and it's built for just demonstrating Uno. And it's just basically a list of, or a collection of all the control, or not all, a good amount of, or a good collection of the UI components that are available to you, whether you want to define them or style them as material, whether you want to style them as fluent, so you have the fluent buttons here. We even have Cupertino styles as well. So if you have that sort of iOS-y type feel that you'd like to style on your application, and lots of great stuff in here. So go around, check it out, play around at gallery.platform.uno. So lots of fun stuff, combo boxes, all that great stuff. And we have, it's all dark and light theming support. So this is also a great reference application for looking on how to actually use components, how to do theme changing, how to do things like this. So it's a nice little place to look around and learn about all the things that are available to you in Uno platform, as well as community toolkit controls and Uno toolkit controls as well. So fun stuff. So the thing is, we have been talking a lot about the UI API. So basically the core of Uno, where you can build you can build your UI across all these different platforms, right? The thing is, we focused a lot on the UI APIs that Uno platform implements, but we also implement the non-UI APIs from Windows in a new cross-platform way, right? So these are runtime APIs that were developed originally for Windows, and they cover a lot of ground, from things like the accelerometer to the clipboards to dealing with gamepads or the flashlight or geolocation, things like that. And so we've implemented these runtime APIs all without needing any platform-specific code, right? So we could take a look at, oh, it just restarted the animation. So let's take a look at some. So I'll keep this up for a second in case people want to go to that link or take a screenshot of the QR code. But this is a nice little sample app, and we're going to look at some code for how to deal with non-UI APIs for Windows for Uno applications. So let's jump to that, and then we'll go back to building our application. So if we go to this unexpected APIs, I'll refresh the page just in case. And so we have this nice Uno application that we built. You'll see that it's, it has a nice little navigation view that we're dealing with here. And so it's just a small sampling of some of the non-UI runtime APIs that we have implemented in a cross-platform way. So think of Xamarin Essentials, but plus, right? Because it's a large API surface that we've covered, and there's even more to go. So things like network connectivity, right? So if you look here at the bottom, we actually have the code that you would need to place into your application. So just by a few lines of code, nothing platform specific. This will work across all your platforms, so you can check your connectivity. This means I'm connected, right? If I were to observe my connectivity, so now we're currently watching and we're waiting for changes in connectivity. If I were to simulate going offline, right, you'll see that it switched to now it thinks that I no longer have connectivity, right? So let's put that back. Let's close this. Things like geolocator. And so again, this is a couple lines of code will get you the geolocation or whatever, and that handles all of the requests for permissions and what happens if you deny, what happens if you allow it, and all that stuff. So if I were to click get geoposition, you'll see that it's waiting, but it's actually here. I've been prompted with the native browser sort of dialogues to request my location, right? So if I allow it, I get where I am right now. Things like, well, I don't have an accelerometer on this machine, but things like if I were to share, right? So you get the native share sheet that's coming from the browser itself. So how you'd want to share this API, this link. One of the really cool ones is speech recognition, right? So look, it's 3 lines of code, and I could do something like this. Oh, first it's got to allow it. Hello, 1, 2, 3. Hello, 1, 2, 3. And there you go, right? So that's pretty cool. It's coming from my microphone that's connected to my little hub here that's connected to USB to my computer, going into the browser and listening and understanding everything. So that's pretty crazy stuff. I won't go through all of them, but another nice one is the folder access. So folder and file access straight from the browser itself. And so this works on other platforms as well. I'm just doing it on WebAssembly for now because it's easiest. But if we go, I have this nice folder called A, and I select it, I get my listing of files that are here. I have a hello.txt. If I were to open that file just quickly, hello.txt, open in another window. Here we go. So hello.txt is here. It's got nothing in it, right? So I can write hello dev days, right? I can write to this file and we'll see it shown up here. And I had already previously given, usually you would get a permission thing saying like, hey, can the browser read your files? But I had already done it, so it's saved in the cookies. But you'll see that it shows up live on the saved file on my actual machine itself through the browser. So interesting stuff. If I had the gamepad, which I had forgotten, but I could plug in with USB, I could plug in my Xbox controller, and you'd see live as I change, the toggles or I press buttons, you'd see it being shown and detecting the changes and all that stuff there. And even nice things like how would we, like title bar, right? Like title bar is something that's sort of Windows specific to the Chrome around the windows, that you could change the name of it, but you can change things like this, right? Even here we could set the title, and you'll notice it's a little bit scrunched up because I have lots of tabs, but you'll notice that the actual title of my tab in my browser changed to what I had placed here, right? So really cool stuff. So definitely go check it out. I'll put it back on if people want to play around with it or look at the code. We'll close this. So yeah, so these are the non-UI APIs. And so I'll keep it up for 2 more seconds. Good. So the next thing that I had mentioned before that I wanted to talk a little bit about more were the Uno extensions. So this is another first-party sort of library that we've built for allowing you to have modular, like battle-tested modular bits of functionality that you could just pick and choose and drop into your applications, right? So whether that's you want to get started with dependency injection, you want to deal with serialization, you want to do logging with Serilog syncs or logging to the console or whatever, like central logging, stuff like that. One of the big ones that I had mentioned was MVUX and navigation. Those are 2 large extensions that are available here. And so this is sort of goes outside of the core product, right? So the core product were those UI and non-UI APIs that work in a cross-platform way. Now we have this ecosystem within this platform that we want to be able to build. It gets you to build applications, get up and running quick, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time on each of the extensions because I know I am running out of time. But as part of the ecosystem of extensions from the Uno extensions library, a main citizen of this library is the MVUX presentation framework implementation, right? So MVUX, it stands for Model View Update, like extended. So it's an implementation of the Model View Update design pattern. And so it encourages the flow of immutable data in a single direction, right? So it's coming from your model, it's going to your view, it's going back through to the update cycle, and it's just moving like that. So you just have sort of this constant stream of feeds of data, right? And so that's what we call them, our feeds. And they're just being observed and reacted to as it flows through. And you have these feeds also represented as states that you can push data to, right? So this deserves a talk all on its own. I'm not going to go into all the detail because it's going to take a long time to explain, and it is a very complex topic. So we do have extensive documentation and example-based explanations on the Uno platform docs. So definitely go check that out under the extensions section called MVUX. But basically, the magic sauce here is that there's a generated bindable version of your view model, so of your model. There's a generated version of it that's created for you by the MVUX extension. And so this abstracts all of the things like iCommands and iNotify property change. It extracts all that away from your actual presentation model so you can keep it simple. And it acts as the bindable glue between your view and your model, your immutable model, right? So a good basic example of the concepts is the main counter sample app that is from the Uno documentation, right? So we looked at the Uno documentation a little bit. It is here. Yes. No. Oh. Here. So the counter app is a great way to get started. It's just a very simple app, right? You can just click a button and it keeps a count. but it's implemented in multiple ways. So it's implemented using XAML as a markup, using MVUX as a presentation framework, XAML with MVVM, C# with MVVM or MVUX, so you can have your choice of which you'd like to choose. So if we looked quickly, where is my code? We can open up Visual Studio Code. And we have the counter app here, right? So the thing is, I've opened Visual Studio Code, and so with Visual Studio Code, we actually have an extension for VS Code as well, if you don't want to use Visual Studio itself. And so from here, you have hot reload access, you have all this stuff. So if you take a look, you have this nice immutable partial record, right, of a main model. It pushes states to this count and to this step, and it has this increment command. You'll notice it's just 3 lines, right? So there's no get set, there's no I notify property change, there's no I command even. It's just a method. If we were to jump to the main page of the XAML, we have our normal binding. So you bind as if it is a command, because it technically is, it's using that generated glue in the middle there, right? And so you have a binding to the count, you have a 2-way binding to the step of the text box, right? So if we were to run this quickly, and running out of time, so I'll do this, and then we will talk about the last little thing, and we'll wrap up. And so as this builds, we'll get ready for the next little thing. Oh, it opened on another window. Where is my browser? Oh, it's gone. Okay, it's not showing. Oh, there it is. So here we go. So here is the counter app. So right, I can increment my step, and so every time I click this, it automatically goes. Not too exciting, but basically that's all done without you needing to do I notify property chains, without you needing to do commands, without needing you to do anything, right? And so this was all run and debugged straight from Visual Studio Code, which is very nice. And so the last thing I just wanted to show, the last thing I just wanted to show was just a nice case study, right? So a nice case study for Uno is actually the NuGet Package Explorer, right? So if we were to go to NuGet.org and say we're on the Uno website, right? We actually can go over here to open in NuGet Package Explorer from NuGet.org, and it'll launch an Uno application that will download this package, and it will you'll be able to sort of explore the actual contents of the package, all using Windows. Oh, sorry, all using Uno, and this is running natively in the browser, right? So you have all the access to the metadata. It's still downloading. Connection's a little slow. There you go. So you have all access to the metadata, the dependencies of the stuff itself. You can dive into the actual file structure of your NuGet packages and see everything from the DLLs. So it's a nice little tool that you can use, and it's built with Uno, and it's hosted directly from the NuGet.org website. So that's a great case study itself. And so, yeah, WinUI on the web, there's 30,000 monthly active users. Like we've seen 22% of them are actually from non-Windows machines, which is really cool and really interesting. And so that was just a whirlwind of Uno platform, how you build it, what it looks like, and so how it works. And so I just want to, it's been a great honor to be able to talk here. I just want to thank everyone. I know it was like a fire hose of information, but I wanted to get as much stuff stuck in there as I could. So I really appreciate you having the time here to listen. And if you have any questions, you want to get started, you can go to the platform.uno website. That we have a very active Discord server where there's lots of people there that will help out, including myself, as well as our GitHub is a great place for support and questions and information as well. So definitely go check those out, and hit me up on my socials if you want to connect and talk about Uno, talk about .NET. So thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for this session. I mean, I just love the kind of variety that you brought in, not just in UI, but also showed us a few other things like, the accelerometer, the geo-positioning, and also threw in that stuff with the NuGet Explorer. because I remember maintaining a NuGet package, and I had to do it with all kinds of crazy stuff, use an old app, import it, and then edit it to even figure out what was happening.
Yeah.
So it's good to see so much happening, right? So you know what? It's been a while after WPF that I came in to do a desktop app, but
Mhm.
now if you ask me, I'm not sure if I'm, I know now Maui is not the only one out there. There is, out there setting
Yeah.
the platforms on fire. It's so nice to see that so much community activity going on there.
Yeah, lots of stuff. Yeah, and the more .NET in the world, the better. So we're happy that there's that we have lots of people playing with .NET, and no matter which framework they're using, as long as it's .NET, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. Let's stay in touch on LinkedIn and other platforms, and have a nice time.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.